My Democratic congressman voted against the health care bill, perhaps because he was afraid of not being reelected. What do you think of voting based on self-interest?
At the end of the day, voting based on self-interest is the only really way one can vote. The framers were intensely aware of majority tyranny. And if our representatives voted solely based on polling, if our government solely functioned based on being a majority of the population, we wouldn't have unpopular Supreme Court decisions like Brown v. Board of Education, and we would have representatives not responding to a higher moral calling, simply referring to poll numbers.
However, I would take the view that it is the job of a congressman to accurately reflect the will of the majority of the people. As James Madison wrote in Federalist 10, it is the job of representatives to refine and enlarge the views of the people to prevent uneducated views from becoming the standard. And what this really means is that if a congressman looks at his constituency and his constituency decides that they love the healthcare bill, they want him to vote for it, then that is what will get him reelected in addition to what the people want. However, if the converse is true, then he has no choice but to vote against the bill.
Okay.
The Gallup poll says that most people really don't like members of Congress as a whole, but they like their individual member. Why is that the case?
I believe that this is the case because they are closer to their member of Congress who is representing them. There are websites and blogs about their member. You can email your member of Congress, your district representative, and they are more aware of appropriations coming to their state and to their districts because they see what is going on. For example, Arne Duncan recently, this past in April, he appropriated $205 million to the state of Colorado for its education, which created more than 3,000 jobs. And so it is more known what happens in one state than what happens in another state.
Also, your representative is an advocate to get funding for your district. Funding for the Gravina Island Bridge, which was deemed a bridge nowhere, was from a representative which made $398 million to go to that bridge. But many of the other Congress people looked as that it's only going to affect a very small population, less than 8,000 people. So even though the people like their district representative because they're getting money, the other people saw the interest of the whole country rather than their interest of the specific district.
In the state of Utah, there are 3 congressional districts. 2 of them are Republican and 1 of them is Democratic. And I believe that because 2 of them are Republican, the state looks more as a Republican state compared to a Democratic state. So people like to.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
In the democracies of the world, the vast majority are parliamentary systems. But in recent years, countries like Israel allow their voters to vote for the prime minister separately from the member of parliament. And the British parliamentary system, electoral system, looks more like the American system with every cycle. Why do you think some of these parliamentary systems are making their system more like ours?
One way in which the British system has become more like ours, and we can see this in the last week, is with the increased use of debate for election for prime minister. Last week, the British people had held the first ever debate for prime minister between the 3 major parties, Labour, Liberal Democrat, and Conservative. And while this is not necessarily like an integral part of the presidential system, it's implied in a traditional part of the presidential system. This increases discussion between the candidates and increases the public knowledge of the different candidates' viewpoints.
In addition, the British parliamentary system primarily has become more like the presidential system, our form of presidential system. In 2005, they separated the legislative and judicial branch, creating the Supreme Court. And I believe that they saw how our system of checks and balances throughout the 3-branch system in the presidential system was working, and how the separation of powers created for a divided government yet effective.
Also, in addition to this, The presidential system has a Congress that is more majority of Democrats. The president is a Democrat, and most likely they're going to vote along the same political lines. It kind of reflects a parliamentary system in a way.
I think so. Do you think the bitter partisanship in Congress today is partly a consequence of the way congressional districts are drawn?
Well, certainly it's a natural phenomenon of the redistricting process that every incumbent party attempts to redistrict it so that they're able to secure either stronger political districts for them to make sure that they are reelected, or to try to attempt to gain an additional congressional district. And what this really does is results in districts where the people's votes begin to count less and less, as they are seen merely as putting their stamp of approval on a candidate who is already assumed to be elected.
But I think congressional districts actually reduce polarization opposed to an at-large system. Before the passage of the 1842 Apportionment Act in Virginia, the 1789 election, all of the representatives were Federalists, even though a significant portion of the population was anti-Federalist. So if those people cannot get their voices heard in Congress, there's going to be more polarization between the different states, because all the states are going to have all the representatives from one party.
I'd like to agree with my colleague, Ms. Kendrick, and say that congressional districts reduce the amount of polarization because there are such things as safe districts. As my colleague, Mr. Garcia-Gonzalez, pointed out, in Utah there is one Democratic safe district allowing for that minority viewpoint to be heard and reduce partisanship.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to jump in?
What's the ideal size of Congress? The House of Representatives.
The ideal size of Congress,
Go ahead and finish your answer. We're going to take a little bit longer.
from my personal opinion,
Yeah.
is much larger when it was now. Specifically, we would go back to pre-1920s levels, before the number was capped at 635 by Public Law 62.5. We would go back to one member of Congress serving 200,000 people, so we would have a size of Congress at around 12,000 individuals, 1,200 individuals to represent the individual needs of the constituents.
I'd like to quickly correct my colleague, Mr. Mamet, and say that Public Law 62.5 capped the number at 435 representatives.
Thank you very much. I think that's
Yeah.
probably fine. Great.
Okay, all right.
Was that right?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.